Hey everyone, welcome to this week's office hours for Replay. I am Cecilia Martinez. I am our community lead here at Replay. Super excited to be back this week. We took a little break last week because we were all at Reactathon. So you probably saw a lot of the tweets that we had and the videos that we were sharing and the pictures that we were sharing. If you were there and you ended up with a really cool unicorn ducky, you probably saw some of the pictures then too. But yeah, we had a really great time. It was super awesome to share Replay with so many people, get their feedback and reactions to it, dig into some debugging, and also hear all the really great talks, including from our own Mark Erickson. So yeah, so if this is your first time tuning in, we do these streams every week on Fridays, and you can kind of view them on your platform of choice. So whatever one you're watching on right now, feel free to stay there. But just to let you know, we also are on Twitch and Twitter at Replay.io. And you can also check us out on YouTube at replay.io/YouTube. And YouTube is also a great way to catch up on past episodes. So we spend some time on stream chatting with members of the team, talking about recent updates to our changelog, and also dig into some debugging as well. So yeah, so thanks so much. We will be checking the chat. So if you have any questions about Replay, about debugging, or for anybody that's here on the team today, feel free to use the chat platform, whether you are in Twitch or YouTube. We will also be checking Twitter as well. So feel free to @Replay on Twitter if you do have any questions for us. So awesome, great. So first thing I'd like to do is actually welcome. We have some guests on stream today from the team. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them on. Just give me 1 second here. Hi. Hey, Mark. Hey, Travis.
Hey,
Greetings.
Good. Oh, and let me go ahead and get that. Yeah, so awesome. So Mark has been on stream before. He joined us just before Reactathon. So Mark is a software engineer here at Replay. And I'm really excited to introduce Travis, who is new to the Replay team. So Travis, you want to give a quick hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everybody. My name's Travis Arnold. Yeah, joining the Replay team, coming from Frame.io. And yeah, just going to do all things, I think, visual and design systems at Replay. So yeah, tackling our elements panel and how that'll look, how we can make Flexbox debugging easier, grid easier. Everyone has all those questions all the time of like, how do we space things and all this and align them? And so I'm excited to dig into the details of that while I'm here. And so yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. And so Travis is actually like a CSS wizard. I've known CSS. I kind of told him this last week at Reactathon, but I've known CSS since like high school days of like fiddling around with it to make live journal layouts and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I've always struggled with it. And I feel like the things that Travis is working on are going to make me really be able to understand and appreciate CSS in new ways. So
I want to brag on Travis for a minute. So one of the mornings at Reactathon, we ran into Nicole. Can't think of her last name. Help
Sullivan.
me. Nicole Sullivan. Thank you. Who is one of the heads of Chrome, and she also has an extensive CSS background, as in like she invented CSS techniques 15 years ago and helped popularize them. And Travis was wanting to show off some experiments he's been doing with various typography setting approaches. So he pulls out a couple code sandboxes and starts showing them to Nicole. And they both just started completely nerding out about the various pros and cons of the layouts and the trade-offs. And, if we add this to Chrome, it would really be helpful. And I was standing by and I was just kind of chuckling inside watching these two experts let's just deep dive into the stuff that they love talking about.
yeah,
Oh, that
it
was
was
such a good
super
time.
fun. Also, I think it was great that Travis's first week was at Reactathon. What an orientation to the team. But yeah, and so Travis, you mentioned that you're going to be working on like visual debugging. Can you talk a little bit about like what that means, like what that entails?
Yeah, definitely. So I think like the easiest way to think about it is right now we have Chrome DevTools or Firefox DevTools, and we can click and see like our grid overlay on screen and to like help debug those things a little bit easier. but there's also some, I think, pitfalls in the way we do that right now. Like, for instance, if you're visually debugging right now in I think either Chrome or Firefox, I'm actually not sure with Firefox, you will lose that grid state if you have it like toggled on. And so things like that, just those like little things that like, hey, I have a fast refresh coming in from a React application. I don't want to lose that like grid debug state because I'm actively working on it. Things like that, maybe even like persisting back to your actual code. So like if we're changing things with DevTools, which we could do now in Chrome, but maybe like making that a lot smoother process where your comments are coming in from replay, etc.
Yeah, I think that's like interesting what you said around the just that change element, because with replay you're recording everything across a period of time, so you can really zero in at certain points and see like what triggered my class to change, and like why is my application layout now all of a sudden like I clicked on a link and something happened, or things like that will be really interesting. I know that I personally have struggled with debugging those types of issues, so I'm super excited to have you on the team.
Oh, thank you. Real quick, another thing I just remembered, we want to like look at variants too. So, right, we have hover states, responsive, and all these things. And so how can we look at those things a little bit better is something I'll be looking at as well. So like just surfacing like what are the variants in a particular element? Can we look at that? Can we look at it at like a higher level on an application or screen level? And also design system stuff. So can we extract a design system that you already have and show you like, oh, here's like, you have 40 colors, can we consolidate them? Those kinds of things. So yeah, really fun thing.
Super awesome. And then, if you're interested in kind of learning more about what Travis is working on, what the team is working on in general, like we do have our Discord, replay.io/Discord, where the team works in public. So we have a design channel, we have a development channel, where we talk about these types of things, like these decisions and how we want to approach them. So if you have like ideas or feedback about what would make it easier for you to debug visual issues, definitely let us know and be a part of that conversation. So great. One last thing I wanted to say about Reactathon too is that if you weren't able to attend, they did live stream the event. So Mark actually was able to give a talk at Reactathon. He was part of the live, the pre-recorded event, but then also hopped on as a speaker at the live show, kind of at the drop of a hat, and that's Mark. Give him a microphone. And
Ben, the organizer, did tell me ahead of time that he would like me to be the backup speakers. Like I was ready to do it. The funny thing is, I actually got the email of him saying someone else was unable to make it. Could I fill in? While I was on the flight out there on Tuesday. So I actually had like a day and a half's worth of notice, which is more than I've had on other occasions. So it was cool.
Yeah, I was hyping you up more than I should, but I'm just kidding. But if you want to watch the talk and all the other great talks, I know we mentioned another one too by Jen Creighton from Netflix about async debugging that I was personally really excited to see, and it was super, super interesting. I posted to the chat the link to the YouTube to watch the Reactathon stream. So definitely make sure that you check that out as well. So we have some fun stuff planned today. I'm excited to kind of talk about some of the changes that took place this week. We're going to be talking about Unicorn Console, focus mode improvements, and then I'm also going to be talking about some changes to our examples and some demos that we have to help you learn how to debug. But first things first, I want to talk about Redux DevTools 0.5.
Emphasis on the pre 1.0 portion of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Travis, I just want to say too, like, thanks so much for swinging by. You're welcome to hang out. But if you do need to drop, I understand. But thanks so much for being here, and we're super happy to have you on the team. But yeah, so yeah, absolutely. So let's I guess like we can dig into Redux DevTools 0.5. I'm going to start by showing it off a little bit. Does that sound like a good way to go?
Yep. Actually, so just to check, do you happen to have the actual extension installed in one of your browsers for point? We can do a quick comparison.
Yes, but I don't know if I have an app running that would.
Okay. Well, I actually just pasted one into our internal chat here. If you want to pull that up.
Perfect.
Just to kind of give a before and after, like this is what it looks like with the actual extension versus what it looks like with the extension UI integrated into our application.
Yes. And then let me see if it's pulling up here.
I see we have a Matt Sikowski on board.
Let's see. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to connect and it's saying no remote connection when I'm opening up my React Dev Tools. So maybe, I mean, Redux Dev Tools. Maybe I don't have it set up correctly when I'm in this site.
Let's
I'm
see
happy
if
to share and we can debug
yeah, I mean,
together.
if you want to pull it open for just a second, we don't have to linger too long on this if we don't get it cooperating. But the app that's in that sandbox should already be configured to talk to the dev tools correctly.
Okay. And then I was kind of just popping this up, and I have this here, the Redux Dev Tools, and that's when I click on that this kind of pops up here.
Let's see. See, I think you're on the Settings tab at the moment. Click on Actions instead. Yep, there we go.
Okay, awesome.
Personally, I actually never use this little browser pop-out. I use the tab that is in the browser DevTools area. If you click out of that pop-out area and then click the overflow next to Network, there should have been a Redux section in here. Yeah. Okay. Tell you what. Okay, for point of exercise, go click like the increment button 2 or 3 times, and then click like add amount once. And then let's go back to the pop out that you were looking at a minute ago.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. So this is the standard Redux DevTools extension. So there's 2 pieces. Number 1, within the actual application source code, the Redux store has to be configured to talk to the extension so that every time an action is dispatched, that data can be transferred over to the DevTools. In the DevTools UI, you've got a bunch of different pieces here. Over on the left-hand side, you can see the list of the dispatched actions. If we click on one of the actions, say like the second increment action or something, on the right-hand side, there's several additional tabs. If you click on the Action tab, it will show you the contents of the Redux action object that was dispatched. Tell you what, actually click on the Increment by Amount action.
There we go.
And so that one says that it was an object that has the usual type field, but it also had a payload field, and the payload value was 2. If we click on the Diff tab, we can see that the change in the state from that dispatched action was that state.counter.value changed from a 3 to a 5 because the reducer code said, oh, I should add 2 because that's what's in the action object. And if we click on the State tab, it should show us what the final total Redux root state was after that reducer calculation completed. One other thing that should be in here is the Trace tab. And if we click on that, fingers crossed, oh, it's not formatted very pretty, but it should be showing the actual stack trace leading back to where the action was dispatched.
Yeah.
I'm actually annoyed because at one point in time, the extension formatted that better. Like it was actually using all the same display logic that the Create React Apps error overlay was using. So this is a set of tools that you can use to inspect the series of actions and state changes in your application and better understand where, when, why, and how things are changing in the app. So Replay is all about actually understanding basically those same things. And in fact, in a lot of ways, Replay is a much more powerful version of the same kind of problem that the Redux DevTools were invented to solve, except that instead of being specific to Redux or Redux-like state management applications, Replay can help you inspect literally any code that can run in the browser whatsoever. So let's go find ourselves a Replay and poke around at that for a minute.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of come back in here. I have one loaded up. I just wanted to switch the tab there. Okay.
And by the way, already, like fingers crossed, I was actually trying to bring up a Replay with the Redux DevTools integration working locally just before this, and it was crashing. So like when I said emphasis on the pre 1.0 part, I was not joking.
Yeah, this is a sneak peek. Like you're watching the stream, you get to like, get an early action view of it.
Like
So
what you're going to see here is live in production right now. You can try this out, but you're also seeing stuff that I hacked together in about a week, and it's there and it runs. It's just definitely not production quality yet. So inside of Replay, we have a bunch of different timelines. We've got our playback timeline at the bottom. You've got various timelines that show, the log messages and things like that. So over on the right-hand side, we've got our console area, and we've got the tabs for the console messages, the DOM nodes, the React components, the network requests. And if you have the experimental Redux DevTools setting enabled, and you have made a recording of an app that was already configured to talk to the DevTools, you should now see a Redux tab showing up in the UI. And you'll notice that right now, this is actually the entire Redux DevTools extension UI and components rendering directly inside of the Replay application. Like literally what I did was I took the actual top level component for the DevTools UI, rendered it, and figured out how to inject the captured Redux actions data into that DevTools UI. Now, this is actually going to change a lot, hopefully very soon. This is a good initial proof of concept, but there's some problems here. One is that a lot of the buttons and the options inside the actual DevTools UI don't really even make sense in a Replay context. For example, right now, if you mouse over one of those actions in the list, you should possibly see some buttons labeled jump and skip. And if you're using the actual extension locally, those let you go back to a previous Redux state or pretend that a given action was never dispatched. And in the Replay context, those don't make sense because that doesn't describe what really happened as you were debugging the application. And I actually tried to figure out a way to turn those off, and it didn't work the way I thought. So I think like right now, if you click those, like either nothing happens or something happens, but it doesn't change the behavior, something like that.
It just kind of grayed out the stuff after it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So in addition, the DevTools UI components don't match our existing themes, although I did at least get it to match the dark theme, light theme part.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, like if you're to change dark theme, it should actually change to dark theme.
Oh wait, that's actually that's okay. There's like I think it's Shift T, but I don't want to. I'm afraid to do it and then break everything if I have people.
And then the other factor is the DevTools UI components are specifically for the DevTools behavior, but we want to do some additional things beyond that. For example, if you look at the console or the network tab, we show like a little red line when you're paused that indicates where in that sequence you are currently paused. Well, the Redux actions log is yet another timeline. And we would like to be able to show that same kind of you are here indicator within the timeline. And the existing DevTools UI components can't do that.
Now, Mark, to confirm there, the way that it works right now is, is that what you're going to say next?
Oh, no, keep going.
Oh, yeah. So just to confirm, wherever you're paused in a point in time, then the actions list will update to reflect everything that's happened at that point in time. So that's essentially how we're showing the timeline currently. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah. So the way I rigged it up is every time you pause, we have a timestamp. and I have the complete list of dispatched actions in memory, and then I filter it to just the ones that are up to that point. I clear out the DevTools data and I re-inject all the actions up to that point. It actually works surprisingly well, but it's certainly not the final approach that we want to have.
Gotcha.
So our plan for the actual version 1 of this is we're basically going to drop the literal integration with the actual DevTools UI components that you see here. And instead, we're going to take some of our existing UI components, like the lists that you see in the console and the network pane, and we're going to repurpose those here on the Redux tab to show the same kind of data. So you've got your actions list, you've got your state, action, diff, trace tabs, but we're going to reuse some of our own existing components to show that same information so that we can match the theme of the rest of the app and have a tighter integration with things like where are we paused right now. If you're on the stack trace tab, you ought to be able to click on one of those lines and jump straight to that file. Like we want to have this feel like it's a native part of the replay application. Now, there might also be times when it could still be useful to see the entire existing DevTools UI as is. We already have a case where you can investigate source map contents in kind of a pop-out tab. And so we're going to try and do the same thing here, where there will be a button somewhere in this panel, and you press it, and it'll pop open a new tab and still show this same existing DevTools UI in that other tab. I haven't yet figured out what we're going to do with the different monitor behaviors. So if you look at the DevTools UI, the tabs that you see, if you go back to inspector view for a second. So the tabs that you see in the upper right for action, state, diff, and trace are technically part of what's known as the inspector monitor component. The other 3 tabs on the bottom are different monitors that show the same data in different ways. So there's a log monitor, that kind of shows like the actions and the data. There's the chart monitor, which shows the state tree as like a connected graph. And then there's the relatively new RTK query monitor. So if you're using Redux Toolkit's RTK query data fetching capability, this, like, the data is kept in the Redux store, and you could read the plain Redux actions, but the RTK query tab shows that formatted in a much more readable way that says, you have fetched, get Pokemon Pikachu, and you have fetched get Pokemon Bulbasaur, and you've also done like a get to-dos query because somehow this app is fetching Pokemon and to-dos at the same time. So like it shows that data in a better way.
It's a Pokemon Go organization app, basically.
Like I haven't yet had a chance to figure out how we're going to handle the multiple monitors versus like the tabs within the inspector monitor. So that's to be figured out. In the absolute worst case, you would see those as you pop out this whole view in a separate tab, and maybe just what's built into our UI would be an equivalent of the inspector tab contents, but rebuilt with replay specific panels.
Awesome. Well, that's the exciting thing about, the replay is that we kind of figure out hard things, right? So you're talking about how we're not quite sure yet how we're going to do it. I've heard that a lot of times, and we end up coming out with really cool things. So I'm excited to see how it goes. And yeah, it was super. This morning I recorded this replay, and it was great to be able to see it in action and click around and start to play with it. So I know that, like you said, you're going to be continuing to work on it. So if anybody has any feedback, we do have our replay Discord again, and that's a great place to chat with Mark. Also, Mark, you do a lot of tweeting about the work that you're doing. I always see you making updates talking about like the incremental changes that you're making, the code that you're working on. So you can also follow Mark on Twitter and, follow along there as well. So
yeah, I've ever since I joined Replay, I've gotten in the habit of having like a running narrative thread in Discord basically on a daily basis. That's just, yeah, here's what I'm working on. I'm poking through this area of the code. Wait, how is this supposed to work? Jason, is this code still live? And part of it's a way to help everyone else on the team know what I'm up to. It's frankly also a chance for me to just kind of share my thoughts and figure out what I'm doing. Like this is literally the running narrative that's in my head anyway. So actually, you can go back to like 2.5 weeks ago and look through some of those threads and see what my thought process was as I was trying to hack this into place for the first time.
yeah, and that's something that I've also started to get more in the habit of. Recently I'll talk about it a little bit later on stream, but we built out a has replay kind of site, and I kept a dev journal during that process, and it's a lot of face hand emojis, and like ran into this issue, spent 30 minutes on it, but finally got it, and it's really cool to go back and see like that thought process and figure out how I solve problems so I can hopefully retain that information and use it for future problems, which is what debugging is all about.
Can I make an associated plug?
Yeah.
Years ago, actually probably about 9 years ago, I could do the math on this. I started keeping a daily work journal. Just like the end of every day, I jot down a few paragraphs of what I worked on, who I talked to, problems that I solved, stuff that I need to pick up with the next day. And I've found that incredibly valuable over the years. There's been times where it's like, okay, I know I ran into that bug like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Was I smart enough to write down a note for myself so that current me can go back and figure out what the heck past me was actually doing to fix that? And I actually put up a blog post that talks about like just basically how valuable I've found that for my own career. Let me see if I can dig up the link for that real fast over here.
Yeah, if you're able to share that in the chat as well. And it, it kind of reminds me of something that, again, going back to Jen's talk around debugging async, is this quote that she said, the best debugging tool is knowing something well, and how, until you're exposed to certain things, you just don't know it until you know it. And with that theme of, asking yourself, how do I know this? And if you're able to refer back to the things that you've seen before, that can be really, really helpful. So yeah, pop that in the chat. Oh, perfect. I'll go ahead and share this out. So check out that blog post there. It's on the Twitch and the YouTube. And yeah, also just Mark's blog in general is a great resource. I'll talk a little bit later about how I updated our examples page, and I included your debugging presentation and the debugging tips blog post under our brand new general debugging tips kind of resources. So awesome. Great. Oh, we got some nice comments.
Frankly, we ought to link Jen's presentation if it's not on that page already.
I agree. Yeah, I'm waiting for. I know that the live stream was posted, and I think that they're going to be kind of like adding chapters, or if not, we can like find the right right moment there to add that as well. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for showing us Redux and talking about how you like to work in public. I know I found it so educational. We always joke around that like Mark is the teacher of the team. And there's a couple of us on the team that are working on some new projects together, and some of the people on the team who are like not on the engineering side learning JavaScript, and Mark is our faithful tutor for sure. So awesome. Well, thanks so much again. Feel free to stick around, or if you have to drop, that's great. I'm going to talk about some of the other changes we had going on this week next. So
we've got our retro meeting in 25 minutes. I am not getting anything done in that time. I'm going to stay here and chill.
All right. Nice. Great. Awesome. So yeah, so the next thing that I want to talk about was our Unicorn console. So this is like a really fun thing. And there's a couple of things that Replay has done that are just like fun, like great developer experience type things. I mentioned before on this stream that the kind of, we have an experimental feature where you could mark a replay as resolved. And then once you do that, a bunch of nice confetti pops out. And that's just like one of those things where it's just like a nice like experience to have. And I feel like the Unicorn console is something that is fun, but it also does serve like a really helpful purpose when you're debugging. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again. We'll have a nice little replay here. So this is a replay of hasreplay.io, which is a site that we built
Happy
out
little
recently.
replays.
Yeah, all these little replays, replays of replays. I love it. And in this example here, I have one component, and from that same component, I have 3 print statements. All of them are printing out URLs, but the source of the URL is a little different. And so the thing about replay is, when you are printing to the console, you can end up in this situation where you have lots of console logs over the point, like the progress of the recording, right? And there's a couple of things you can do with this. You can like edit the output to like try and be more descriptive, or you can use conditional log points here where you say like only log if it's in a certain point. And that's some kind of helpful ways to narrow it down. But if you're like, I'm a very visual person, I like to be able to pattern match really quickly. And so that is where the Unicorn console can come in come in handy for things like this. So it's called Unicorn Console, but really it's about categorizing print statements. So now when you go to edit, let's see, I keep looking at one screen and not the other. So again, here I have kind of a author.avatar URL, and we have this badge now that you can click on, and you can add either a unicorn icon or you can add various colors. And so what that does is it allows you to quickly identify the corresponding logs for a given print statement. And you can see, I can see that it's green here, and I can see that it's green here. And that really kind of quickly lets me quickly identify those are the logs that are associated with that print statement, even if the formatting is similar because they're all URLs. And, I can do that with every single one of my console logs here. I can make one purple.
What color does that turn if you pick the unicorn?
Oh, it actually becomes a unicorn. There was some, yeah, there was some pixel art magic that went into this, and I'm assuming it's I think I saw it was in a Discord thread. If you want to track that down, and I think there was a couple of different versions of it before landing on this very cute rainbow unicorn like icon that we have here now, which I absolutely love and would love to see on a t-shirt someday. And but yeah, so that's kind of that. What it does is essentially when you have all these different types of logs, you can pattern match and be able to identify, oh, like obviously these are happening for every single time the component renders. So we're going to see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But if you think about something where maybe it only outputs like 3 times throughout the recording, but they're getting lost in a lot of other logs, which you don't want to close because they are helpful and add context. This will help you kind of get right to that point in time. And then you could go in and you could, rewind directly to that point, and then be able to see what's happening from there. So yeah, so that is Unicorn Console. It's really fun. It's enabled by default, so you don't have to, go into experimental settings to enable it. That does remind me, if you see anything on any of these streams that are experimental and you're like wondering how do you set that up, it's actually in their settings. So it's here, settings, and then we have this experimental tab. And that's how you can choose, what's here. Unicorn Console is already here, but it's enabled by default. If you can turn it off if you want to. Same thing again here with the Redux Dev Tools. This is how you would enable that. So yeah, it's always kind of fun to go in there and see what we're working on. There's some, like you may have seen as I was scrolling through, there's something called 10-minute replays in there, which is something that we're introducing to allow for longer replays. So you can always check those out. Keep in mind they're experimental, right? But it's kind of fun to be able to see what we're working on next. So awesome. The next thing that I wanted to feature that we did kind of come out with this week is we made some improvements to our focus mode. And this is work that Brian Vaughn was working on. So the feature was initially released maybe about a month ago. Gerald worked on getting that out the door. And essentially what focus mode lets you do is it lets you literally focus in on a subset of the replay. And after some like really great feedback and iterating on it, we released some improvements to it this week. One thing you'll notice is that the icon is a little different. So it actually looks like a little pinch squeeze motion now, which is what replicates. But you can click on this icon here to start focus mode. And focus mode lets you debug a subset of the replay. And there's a link that goes to our docs kind of explaining more about it. And previously, you could do the same thing here, which is you're dragging the handles in and out. And as I'm dragging, you'll see like console logs that appear and disappear that are associated with that point in time. That was already existing. Now you'll also be able to click and drag the range, which is new. And these timestamps are now also editable. So you can change this from 8, to 12 and be able to stay there. The other nice feature is that previously there was a modal that popped up in the middle of the screen. And so now we have a banner, so you're able to see more of what's happening in the actual dev tools as you're dragging around to be able to better decide where you want to focus in. And then you can either discard or save your focus mode. So I'm going to go ahead and discard just because.
Another nice little improvement here is that previously when you clicked the start focus mode button for the first time, it still had the entire recording time range selected. And so you had to go over to the left side, drag the slider all the way from the left edge over to about where you wanted it, start at the right side, drag the slider all the way over. And now what it does is it by default auto focuses on, I think, like a 5-second time range centered around where you are currently paused. And you can still drag the sliders from there, but that actually saves you some of the having to drag it back and forth just to be able to do the initial focusing part.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Basically, we figured that if you are paused in a certain area, you're probably already working in that area. And you want to, typically the use case for this that we see is you're paused in a certain area, but there's lots of console logs, there's lots of function executions happening and that are showing up from the entire recording. And so you want to be able to narrow into that specific area that you're working on to see exactly what's happening around that point in time. So automatically zeroing in on that area makes it a lot more efficient of a developer experience. So yeah, really appreciate the work that went into this. I actually use Replay a lot. I'm like probably one of like our Replay super users. I'm always finding things, and this is something that I tend to use focus mode to dig into specific function executions, and I'm really excited for this one. So
yeah,
that is also, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Huge kudos to Brian Vaughn. Brian put in an amazing amount of work at this, and I was looking through and reviewing his PR, and I'm like, okay, not only is this really useful functionality, but the code changes are really good and really easy to read. Brian has an amazing ability to be very thoughtful about UI design and interactions, and he did a great job working on this.
Yeah, and I feel like it's very, very like nice, methodical kind of work, very like pretty code, I guess I should say. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but
I know we have what we're calling a focus mode 1.2 being planned. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about putting in that, but there's definitely more improvements to focus mode coming hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you can also always like check out, like, again, our DevTools repo is open source. So all of the issues that we work on, all the pull requests that are taking place, they're all there in GitHub. And so you can always check that out. That is going to be at, record replay /devtools. And it is open source. We also do have some great contributors. And so you can join us in Discord if you have any questions or if you're interested in contributing as well. So
in fact, I saw a couple people who were working on cloning the repo and trying to get their dev environments set up just within the last day or two. People outside the replay team. We would love to have PRs. Like, we don't necessarily expect them, but we would love to have more external PRs.
Yes, that reminds me, I wanted to give a quick, so I like to do contributor shout outs when we have PRs, but I do want to give a shout out to Ayush9398, who was in our Discord asking some really great questions and even just helping us better understand the process of setting up the development environment, which like that alone can be super, super helpful. to get like outside contributor feedback on how we can improve documentation around like the higher level structure of the app. So yeah, so always great to come in and ask questions and chat with us. We love that kind of interaction. So.
And I believe Ryota Murakami, who's someone that I've chatted with over the last couple of years on Twitter, I think is trying to work on a PR to make text editor font size configurable.
Oh, that would be a cool one for that's like that's a good accessibility win too, I feel, which I know we're working on some of that stuff with our keyboard shortcuts as well. So awesome. Well, speaking of open source contributions, the last thing that I want to talk about while we have some time here is well, two things. The first I mentioned is that we have made some improvements to our examples page. So we do have kind of this short URL of replay.io/examples that you can visit. And previously it was just kind of like a list of a bunch of links, and it wasn't really organized. And so we made some improvements to that this week that I'm really excited about. As I mentioned, it now features much more Mark Erickson, which in my mind is always an improvement. And so yes, this is our new examples page. It's broken out into different use cases. So if you are, creating reproducible bug reports, if you're debugging with Replay, we have an example of debugging JavaScript, React use effect, and then also debugging a Redux dispatch. We have some additional kind of debugging examples from real world production websites that we recorded, as well as Matush from Andorus from Stately's example about debugging TypeScript with Replay Node. And then also some examples about how you can explore code bases with Replay, because Replay is not just about debugging, it's also about learning and being able to inspect code. And again, my favorite are general debugging resources. So blog slides, you have some webinar videos in here as well, and some information about debugging CSS, which I'm hoping that Travis will also be able to help us in that area in some good visual debugging resources. So yeah, check that out. Again, replay.io/examples. And you probably noticed at the top of the screen that there was this kind of mention of reproducible bug reports. And so this is a screenshot here of hasreplay.io. So hasreplay.io is a new site that we kind of hacked together, built out over the last week or so. Just before Reactathon, I actually have been documenting the process in a dev journal. That's when I was mentioning earlier. All the way through from the beginning to the end, or to current, I shouldn't say end, it's always ongoing. But this is a collection of all GitHub issues that have the has replay label. So these are essentially like whenever we create GitHub issues in our projects, and a couple of other open source projects do this as well, if the GitHub issue contains a replay reproduction of the bug, they'll use this has replay label in order to identify kind of bugs that are already reproduced and ready to be debugged. And so it's a way for you to, there's kind of two different use cases here. One is if you're looking to contribute to a project and you want to find a bug to work on, it's a lot easier to start when you have a reproduction of the bug already, right? I think that's always step one in any debugging process, is reproducing the bug. So these already come, ready to go with a replay. And we include the link to the issue. We include any other labels that are associated with it. And then we also have a link directly to the associated replay. So you can click on this and open up the replay for the bug. You can start digging into it, start seeing how, if you could add any context or potentially even like push a fix for it. The other use case is you can actually view closed issues as well. And these give you some really kind of good examples of being able to see the bug and then see the corresponding PR that fixed it. So you can see like what was broken, inspect the replay, and then also see how we ultimately, or like the project ultimately ended up fixing it, which is really great for learning. Kind of going back to that, the best debugging tool is knowing something, and you can't know something until you've seen it. So these are some real world examples of bugs that were fixed leveraging a replay. We also pulled out if there was a Loom video. Another thing that we like to do is record ourselves like clicking through, describing what the problem is. So those can be great examples as well, because you're able to see somebody talking through it, what's going on with that bug. So the other fun thing about this site, and this is something that was like a little bit harder than it looks, is that this site actually has a built-in buggy mode. So if I click on this little green check mark, it toggles between a working mode, and again, working because like there's already bugs in there in the working mode too, but this intentionally buggy mode where I have introduced some bugs into the UI. And this is harder than it looks or sounds because you have to make the bugs like exist, but then also not completely break the build. So you can't just be like true equals false or like, things like that. And so it was kind of a fun exercise in thinking around, okay, what are some common bugs that people run into? What are some bugs that I personally ran into while even building this site, and figuring out how to like get them back into the UI in this buggy mode. So, I kind of created a replay of the buggy mode, and this is linked in our examples page. And I have kind of, included all of the bugs listed here. And so if you want to kind of go do some practice and spelunking and start digging in, you have these like 4 bug cases that are kind of ready to go. And so I want to kind of go through one. So like spoiler alert, if you want to do this yourself later on, like, just keep that in mind. One thing I do want to mention is that since these are intentional bugs, obviously like in the code you were going to see where I make the decision to be buggy or not be buggy. So there's a little bit of breadcrumbs, but I think I tried to do it in a way that still kind of can show you some like existing bugs and like real world use cases. So let's go ahead and dig into one. I'm going to show you here. So in buggy mode, we kind of have, in working mode, you can see the labels here. The text will be either white or black, depending on what the background color is. So we're ensuring that there's good color contrast between the background of the label and the font color. Once we switch into buggy mode, that breaks. And so these, you can't really read them anymore because everything is white. So to start to debug this, go into Dev Tools. And the thing that I like to do is to get an orientation of the app. And so I kind of use my picker, and I'm going to actually go into like one of these labels. And I can see that, again, I have a prop here of buggy is true. So that's the magic behind buggy mode. It's literally like a prop, or it's held in state. And I can see that I have a label, and that label node has a color, and then it has the name of that label. And I can see this is being rendered by issue row. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that issue row component and see what's going on here. And then there's this function label at the bottom, right? And so on this line, I can see that I have like this line of code that's like font color equals buggy or not buggy. And so, kind of suspending disbelief a little bit, right? But just kind of thinking around, let's actually see like why this breaks it. So we are passing through, if it's not buggy, the label node color. And then if we're not, we're passing through the entire object. But I want to like dig into this actual function here, this get label font color function. So in our command palette, we can actually search for a function, and it's a get label font color. And I have this kind of utilities.js. And we can see that we have 120 hits of this function, but only 40 hits of the actual execution of this section. This never hits because the colors are 6 digits, not 3 digits. What this function is essentially doing is it's grabbing the hexadecimal, it's parsing out an RGB, and then it's evaluating a contrast value. And then if it's greater than a certain amount, it's going to be black. If it's less than a certain amount, it's going to be white. So we can log, we here we're always like R is G and B is always 0. And then here we're essentially taking those values and we're parsing out the hexadecimal code based on where it is in the array. And then here we're evaluating. So if we go to our this line here, and I start to just log some values. So if I do R, G, and B, and I hit save, and I kind of go to my console, I'll be able to see, I have another one in here somewhere, that it's like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, but earlier in the, here where it's not buggy, we actually do have some values that are being loaded. Once we get to a certain point, here is where we start to just see all zeros. And as we can probably imagine, because we're not actually hitting 6 digits, because again, this is going to be label color doesn't really exist because it's an object. We're not actually ever evaluating that. So our HSP also, as you can probably imagine, becomes 0 after a certain point in time. So here we have some values which could be greater than or less than the 127.5 threshold, but here we're getting 0 every single time. And so that is why it essentially always becomes white, because it's never going to be greater than 127.5. So that's an example.
That's a pretty subtle bug. I actually was like, when we were describing this, I was expecting that it was literally going to be like, is buggy, like just make it white, but no, like this is, you have the actual bug in here.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's like obviously like we're passing through the wrong value, but it's more than that. It's actually then because like it doesn't just break because we're passing through the wrong value, but the function is still returning something. Like the function isn't like, oh, you're missing a parameter. It's just evaluating incorrectly because it's not able to, because it's grabbing values off of the object because it's arrays. So it's not like there wasn't a type error or anything. It's just that or it wasn't like, oh, like that does not exist and so it failed. It actually has to run in order to like be able to push it to production. So so it just ends up evaluating incorrectly. So so that was a kind of a fun one. You also, this functionality, I talk about it in the dev journal, but I had to Google a lot how to like I noticed that when I was examining GitHub's website, that they did some kind of color contrast calculation for their label colors, because this is kind of similar to the GitHub UI, and went down a little bit of a rabbit hole figuring out how that was done, and converting hexadecimal to RGBs and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, so if you're interested, I linked all the blog posts that I referenced inside that dev journal as well. And so that's going to be published in our blog today, the dev journal, and a video of kind of working through some of these bugs. But would love for people to get in there, check it out, record, and also start using has replay on your own GitHub issues, and you will show up here in our list. So if you have some bugs that are kind of tricky, or you're looking to maybe get more contributors, or if you just want to like have reproducible bug reports, because that's helpful, we have a replay.io/OSS page as well. That helps you kind of get set up if you have an open source project. So Replay offers, it's actually here in our guide. That's probably a better way to do it. Okay, yeah, so Replay OSS, we offer free plans for OSS projects, but we can help you get set up so that you can solicit reproducible bug reports, record automated tests, and then also it's great for documenting pull requests from contributors to be able to have faster code reviews. So awesome. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much, everyone. It was nice to see some comments today, too. Putting those on the screen. Mark, anything that you want to throw out there?
Yeah. So the timeline for myself. So I've actually been spending this week doing code janitorial duty. I've been trying to unwind circular imports in our code base. Woohoo. Making progress. I think I've knocked out about 3/4 of them, and I'm hoping to get the rest of them in the next couple of days. But my plan is to try to tackle implementing Redux DevTools V1 starting next week. I was hoping Monday, but it might take me another, especially since we're most of the way through Friday and I haven't gotten much done today. It's probably going to take me another couple. It's going to take me another couple days to try and unwind the rest of these circular imports. Then I will tackle Redux DevTools V1. So maybe kind of like Tuesday or Wednesday next week, I'll start working on that, hopefully. So no exact ETA on when that will be ready. I would hope it would be within the next couple weeks. Fingers crossed.
All right, sweet. And then you mentioned the circular dependencies thing, and there's like a really interesting Discord thread about that too, and like why that's important. And so I feel like I've learned more about build processes, like code quality, in these like the time I've been at Replay than probably the previous like 3 years. But so just by reading all these Discord threads. So again, you can join us replay.io/Discord. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining. Thanks to Travis also for who was able to join earlier, and thanks to everyone who kind of hopped on, watched, through like asked us, commented. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next week. Cheers.